Claire had grown accustomed to the stillness of her Oregon evenings. The house, once bright with chatter, footsteps, and the occasional slammed door, had settled into a kind of quiet that felt both peaceful and unnerving. The rooms were larger somehow, emptier in their echoes. Her son Daniel, at 23, was grown enough to have his own place, his own life, yet he remained nearby, anchored by habit and devotion. For that, Claire was grateful. He had been her constant, her reason to work late shifts, to patch broken things, to keep going when everything else had fallen apart. The day was ending in a spill of gold. Soft light flooded her kitchen, warming the edges of the room and painting her teacup amber. Claire stood at the counter, both hands wrapped around the mug, savoring the simple comfort of heat against her palms. It was a small ritual, one that marked the close of long days. The quiet felt earned, familiar, and she let her shoulders loosen as she watched the last sunlight fade across the pine trees outside. When Daniel stepped into the kitchen, the moment shifted. His movements were slower than usual, deliberate, as if he were carrying something fragile inside him. Normally he entered rooms like light followed him, smiling, teasing, quick to fill silence with warmth, but not tonight. Something in his face made her set the cup down. She studied his expression, her mother's instinct tightening like a string pulled too taut. "Everything all right?" she asked, voice gentle, barely above the hum of the refrigerator. He nodded, but his jaw worked before he spoke. "Yeah, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've been keeping to myself." Claire's pulse stumbled. Daniel had never been one for secrets. Since boyhood, he had worn his thoughts openly, sometimes recklessly. For him to hesitate meant whatever followed came from somewhere deep. He leaned against the opposite counter, arms crossed, eyes steady. "Mom," he said quietly, "I've been thinking about us. About you, about how much you've done for me, and I can't keep pretending I don't see how lonely you are." The words landed hard. Claire blinked, feeling the air shift, as though the walls had drawn closer. Loneliness had become her silent companion over the years, but she had never wanted him to see that truth. "Daniel, sweetheart," she said softly, steadying her breath, "you don't have to worry about me." "I'm fine." He shook his head, his voice low but fierce. "No, you're not. You hide it well, but I know you. You've spent your whole life giving everything to everyone else, to me. And you've had no one looking after you. I can't ignore it anymore." Her heart tightened, prickling with uneasy emotion. It was true. His words, his perception. But to hear it said aloud by her son made something twist inside her. His gaze didn't waver, and there was something protective in it, something that unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. "What are you trying to say?" she asked slowly. Daniel looked down, wrestling with the truth before lifting his eyes again. They were clear, almost luminous with determination. "I don't want to just be your son anymore," he said, voice soft but steady. "I want to take care of you the way no one else has. I want to give you the happiness you've been missing." The world seemed to pause. Even the kitchen light felt too bright, the silence between them too hard. Claire's breath faltered. The meaning behind his words rolled through her like a wave she didn't know how to stand against. She set her teacup down with shaking fingers. "Daniel," she whispered, startled by the tremor in her voice. "That's not something you should say." But he didn't retreat. His face held no trace of humor, no hint of hesitation. He stepped closer, anchoring one hand near hers on the counter, not touching, yet near enough for his warmth to reach her. Her heart began to pound in her chest, startled by feelings she hadn't encountered in years. "Mom," he said quietly, almost pleading now. "I mean it. I don't want to watch you live like this anymore, alone. I want to give you more than gratitude. I want to give you love." Claire drew back, her breath unsteady. The words settled deep inside her, stirring places she had long buried. She searched his face and saw not the boy she had raised, but a man, strong, sincere, filled with a devotion she hadn't expected and didn't know how to face. In that instant, the steady, safe world she had built began to fracture, subtle and sharp. She didn't know whether to cry, to laugh, or to flee. She only knew that nothing about their lives could return to what it had been. The kitchen light glowed softly, but the air around them felt strange, charged, far from ordinary. Claire's hands were cold even with the tea still steaming beside her. She whispered to herself, "Breathe," but her body wouldn't obey. Daniel wasn't speaking with youthful confusion. There was intent in his words, clarity in his tone. "I know this isn't what you expected," he said, leaning forward slightly, "but I've been holding it in for years. I need you to know how I feel." Her throat was dry. "Daniel," she began, "you're my son. You don't understand what you're saying." He shook his head fast, desperate, eyes shining. "I do understand. I'm not a kid anymore. I've seen what your life looks like, how much you've carried without help. You deserve someone who makes you feel cared for, not out of duty, but because they truly love you. And if no one else has done that yet, then I will." The sound of his words seemed to echo through the room. They were bold, yes, but honest, drenched in the kind of tenderness that couldn't easily be dismissed. She wanted to protest, to find the strength to draw a line between them, but she couldn't move. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. "Daniel," she said at last, voice trembling, "that's not something you can offer. Not like this." He didn't pull away. Instead, he moved closer, the distance between them vanishing inch by inch. His tone softened to something raw, aching. "I'm not talking about something wrong, Mom," he whispered. "I'm talking about a life that isn't empty anymore. You've been everything to me, and now I just want to be that for you, to give you warmth, to make sure you never feel unseen again." Claire felt her composure slipping. Those words, so full of sincerity, rang through the walls she'd built long ago. For years she had secretly wished someone would notice her, not as a mother, not as someone who held life together, but as a woman, with desires, fears, softness. The realization both scared and broke her. Her fingers twitched, pulling away abruptly as if his nearness might catch flame. She rose to her feet, her chair scraping against tile. "Daniel, please," her voice caught between pleading and disbelief. "Do you know what you're saying? Do you realize what this means?" He stood too, tall and still, his calm presence filling the space between them. "I do," he said simply, "and I'm not asking for an answer tonight. I just needed you to hear me, to know I see you. You're not invisible to me, Mom. You're not just a mother. You're a woman who deserves love." Something inside her cracked. His words pierced too deeply, brushing against the truth she had tried so long to ignore. She wanted to tell him he was mistaken. The confusion had blurred his gratitude, but a faint whisper inside her, lonely, aching, human, knew he had touched something real. She turned her face away, afraid her eyes would reveal too much. "Daniel," she said softly, "this can't be simple. You're asking for something that would change everything between us." He took one small step closer, voice barely a breath. "I know. But I'm willing to take that risk if it means giving you the happiness you've missed." Her heart pounded so fast it hurt. One part of her wanted to protect them both, to restore the boundary that had always existed. Another part, shaken by the warmth he stirred, didn't know how to silence its yearning. "Don't say more tonight," she whispered, trying for steadiness. "Please, I need time. I need space to think." Daniel nodded, his expression shifting to gentle understanding. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll wait. I just couldn't keep it inside anymore." Claire turned away quickly before the tears came. She could still feel his gaze on her back as she left the kitchen, each step heavier than the last. Upstairs, alone, she pressed her hand to her chest, as though to steady her heart. His voice replayed in her mind. "You're not just a mother. You're a woman who deserves love." No matter how she tried to push the thought aside, it stayed, unnervingly alive. His confession had cracked open a silence she hadn't realized had become her entire life. That night, Claire lay awake beneath the dark ceiling, her eyes tracing the faint patterns of shadow. The house was utterly quiet, but inside her, everything clamored, her heartbeat, her thoughts, his words. "I don't want you to be alone anymore. I want to give you happiness." They wouldn't leave her. She turned onto her side, clutching the blanket, whispering a useless reminder to herself. He's my son." She had raised him from scraped knees to independence, held his hand through storms of adolescence, watched him grow into the man now brave enough to speak the unthinkable. And yet, he wasn't wrong about one thing. She had been lonely, painfully, stubbornly lonely. Her marriage had ended long ago, leaving ache where intimacy once lived. Friends had fallen away, romances never returned. She had devoted everything she had left to him, and in doing so, had let her own heart grow quiet. And night after night, she sat in the quiet house, feeling like life was moving forward without her, until Daniel said those words. Now she couldn't stop wondering what it meant. By morning, the weight of sleeplessness sat heavy in her eyes. She moved through her routine insolence, making coffee, setting her cube on the table, trying to calm the storm inside. But when she walked into the kitchen, she found Daniel already there waiting for her. He looked nervous but determined. His hands rested on Thettable, and when he lifted his gaze to Hare, it was filled with both hope and fear. Claire froze for a moment, then sat down across from him. "Mom," he said softly, "I didn't mean to upset you last night. I know it's a lot to take in, but I can't take my words back. I said them because I meant them." Claire's throat tightened. She gripped her coffee cup, not to drink, but to steady her shaking hands. "Daniel, what you said, it changes everything. I don't know if I can look at you the same way anymore." He leaned forward, his voice gentle. "I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to ruin what we have. I just want you to know you're not invisible, Tome. You've carried so much for so long. I want to be the one who carries you now." Chest ached hearing him speak like that. She wanted to believe his feelings were simple, just gratitude mixed with affection. But deep inside, she knew it was more than that. His eyes gave it away. There was devotion there, something that went beyond son to mother. Claire placed her cup down and rubbed her temples. "Do you understand the weight of what you're offering? You're asking me to step across a line that can't be crossed back. You're asking me to see you differently." Daniel nodded, his face serious. "I know, and I'll accept whatever choice you make, but I won't take my words back because they're the truth." Her eyes filled with tears. She tried to hide. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her like this with such raw honesty. She had longed to feel cherished again, to feel like she mattered. And now here it was offered in the most unexpected, impossible way. She turned her face away, afraid her emotions would betray her. "Daniel, I need time," she whispered. "I'll give you all the time you need," he said quickly. "I don't expect you to answer now. I just wanted you to know that my heart is here with you." His words hung in the room like a promise. Claire closed her eyes, torn between two truths. She was his mother, and yet she was also a woman who hadn't been touched by love in years. Could she ignore the warmth his words stirred in her? Could she deny that his presence filled the emptiness inside her? The kitchen fell silent, broken only by the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. Claire's mind was a storm of longing and fear. She knew one thing for certain. Whatever choice she made, her life with Daniel would never be the same again. The morning sunlight spilled through the curtains, soft and golden, but Claire felt no warmth from it. She sat at the kitchen table, staring into her untouched cup of coffee. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of their refrigerator. Daniel had already left for work, and for the first time since his startling words. She had the space to breathe, but even in silence, his voice lingered in Harryar's. "You're not just my mother. You're a woman who deserves to be loved." Her heart twisted at the memory. She wanted to erase it, pretend it had never been spoken, but she couldn't. The look in his eyes, the weight of his voice, the way his hand almost reached hers, those moments clung to her like shadows. She stood abruptly, walking to the sink, splashing cold water on her face. "This isn't right," she whispered to herself, gripping the counter. "I'm his mother. That's all I'm supposed to be." But another voice inside her whispered back. "And what if that's not all you are to him anymore?" Claire tried to fight it, she told herself. Daniel was confused that maybe his affection had twisted into something else, because they had been each other's whole world for so long. She had no partner, no family close by. He had grown up watching her struggle and sacrifice. Maybe that had changed the way he saw her. Still, her chest tightened when she remembered the intensity of his gaze. It wasn't confusion. It was deliberate. That evening, when Daniel came home, he moved carefully, as if he knew every step might break the fragile balance between them. He greeted her softly, asking about her day. But the weight of their unfinished conversation hung between them. Finally, Claire sighed and sat down, motioning for him to do the same. "Daniel, we can't avoid this. We need to talk." Key sat across from her, eyes steady, waiting. "I've thought about what you said," she began, her voice low but firm. "And I need you to understand what you're asking is not simple. It's not something I can just accept. I don't even know how to respond." Daniel leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. "I don't need an answer now. I just need you to know I'm serious. I don't want to live pretending anymore. I see you, Mom. Not just the woman who raised me, but the woman you are." Her chest acted at his words. She wanted to cry, to shout, to hug him and make all of this disappear. Instead, she whispered, "And if I say no?" He swallowed, his voice soft. "Then nothing changes. You'll always be my mom. I'll still be here. But at least you'll know the truth that someone loves you with everything he has." Her heart trembled. She saw the strength in his eyes, but also the vulnerability. He wasn't playing a game. He had opened himself completely, risking rejection from the one person he loved most. Claire stood walking to the window. Outside, the street was calm. Children riding bikes, neighbors walking dogs, the ordinary world carrying on. But inside her house, nothing was ordinary anymore. She turned back to him. "Do you realize the cost of this? People wouldn't understand. We might lose everything. Our bond, our trust, the way we've always been. I don't know if I could ever look at you the same." Daniel rose slowly, stepping closer, but not too close. His voice was low, steady. "I know the risks, but I also know what it's like to live watching you suffer insolence. I'd rather risk everything than let you spend another year feeling unseen." Her breath caught. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't move. His words had reached a place in her she thought was long dead. The part of her that still longed to be held, to be chosen, to be loved. Not for what she gave, but for who she was. She pressed her hands against her face, trembling. "Daniel, I don't know what to do." He hesitated, then whispered, "Then don't decide now. Just let yourself feel. Don't push it away." The silence between them stretched, thick and fragile. Claire finally lowered her hands, her eyes red but shining. She looked at him, not just her son, but a man standing before her with his heart in his hands. And in that instant, she saw both danger and hope. The night passed slowly. Claire lay awake again, but this time she didn't fight her thoughts. She let herself remember what it felt like to be loved, to be touched, to be wanted. She remembered the ache of years gone by, the loneliness that had hollowed her out. And then she remembered Daniel's words, his promise to fill that emptiness. Be dawn. She still had no answer. The following days carried a quiet tension. They moved around each other carefully, as though one wrong word could break the fragile truce. Daniel didn't press her, but his presence spoke louder than words. Hess stayed near, helped with everything, and looked at her with that same unshaken devotion. One evening, as Claire folded laundry, she caught herself smiling at the thought of him waiting in the kitchen. Her heart raced with guilt. She reminded herself she was supposed to be strong to keep boundaries, but the smile remained, proof that something inside her had already shifted. She carried the basket into the living room and found him sitting there reading. He looked up, and for a moment their eyes locked unguarded. The air grew heavy again, that same pull between them. She tried so hard to resist. "Daniel," she whispered, setting the basket down, "I don't know where this will lead. I don't know if I can ever give you what you're asking." He stood slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Then let me wait. Let me prove to you that what I feel isn't a mistake. All I ask is that you don't shut the door completely." Her chest rose and fell, her emotions tangled. She wanted to tell him no, to protect them both from the storm that could come. But the words wouldn't form. Instead, she found herself whispering, "I don't know if I can close it." The look in his eyes softened, almost relieved. He didn't move closer, didn't touch her, but the space between them carried a silent promise. Claire turned away quickly, afraid of what might happen if she stayed in his gaze too long. She pressed her hands against the folded clothes, her heart pounding. She hadn't given him an answer, but she hadn't turned him away either. The night stretched on, and Claire sat alone in her room, staring at the moonlight on the floor. The choice still hung in front of her, heavy and impossible. But one truth burned clear inside her heart. Whatever decision she made, life would never return to the way it was before. And as she closed her eyes, a tear slipped down her cheek. Because deep inside, she knew the hardest part wasn't rejecting his offer. The hardest part was admitting that a piece of her wanted to say yes. The story of Claire and Daniel had reached its turning point. And the next word, the next choice would change everything forever.